So I'll repeat the content of this slide, as I am not sure to which point I was with you all. Okay, so we were talking about 8 singleton method, right? So okay, I think Keval has written some ciphered message. I'm not able to decipher it. It's okay, it's okay. Okay, so here you can see that we are using 8 singleton method. So whenever someone requests an instance of iStaff repository, give an instance of mockstaff repository. But each time, should we create a new instance of iStaff repository, or we should reuse it? That's what our concern is here. Okay, so with add singleton, right, create only one instance, and whenever you need it, just use the same instance. Don't create again and again. Okay, so here where we need it at 2 places. In the create action method, when we call the add method. In the view, when we call probably the get all staff method. So let's see it. So here you can say we have this method like add. So this is the implementation of a mockstaff repository. Okay, here we have add and get all staffs. Okay, so here in the create action method for the post, you can see we are calling the add. So here we need one instance. Okay, another instance we would be requiring is here in the create view, where we are calling get all staff. Okay, so we need instance at 2 places. Okay, but it won't be creating 2 times. It will be reusing the same instance that it would create at the first instance when it is requiring here for the add method. Okay, the same instance would serve this get all staff request. Okay, so here, so when I load this page, you see the total staff count is 3. When this page is loaded, the total staff count is 3, because in the list you are aware we have 3 staff members, right? So essentially user has made a request to the URL, say localhost/home/create, and we are seeing the staff count 3 because right now 3 staffs are existing in the system. So how this is retrieved, how this value is shown here. So to serve this request, an instance of the home controller is created first of all, right? You know the constructor, right? There we have a dependency injection in the constructor itself. So the instance of home controller is created, and home controller has a dependency on iStaff repository, right? We are injecting it in the constructor. So that's the first time the instance of the service is requested. And so ASP.NET Core creates an instance of the service and injects it into the home controller. Okay, and then create view also needs an instance of the service to calculate the total number of staffs. So with singleton, the same service instance is used. So the same instance is already created, is provided to the create view as well. And that's why, for example, in this form, now if you provide the name, right, in the name text box, right, and other details, and you click on the create button, then what should happen, right? If you fill this form, right, and if I click on create button, then what should happen? Anyone? What should be the value of count? Should it remain 3? Should it increase? Yes. So if I click on create, right, then what will happen? The count. So here right now I have just filled the form, right? Now I'll click on it. So as I click on it, you will see that the count has increased to 4. Okay. Now again, if I click, the count will again increase to 5. Why? Because it is the same instance, right? And it has access to all the list member which are already available, right? So as the same instance is serving again and again, the count will keep on incrementing. Okay, so that is add singleton. And that's why the same instance has access to all the application, right? An entire list. So it knows how many members are available right now in the list. So that's simple. Okay. Now next. So now, instead of add singleton, we are using add scoped. Okay. So here you can see that the total staff count is 3. The total staff count is 3. Now here, what should happen? Okay, when you click on the button, should it keep on incrementing or you are expecting a different behavior? So here, as I filled the new form, as I click on the create button, right, the count will increment to 4. You can see here. Now, so again, if I fill the form and I click on the create button, what should happen? Count should increment to 5 or not? First time there were 3 members, so it was showing 3. Then you click on the create button, so the count increments to 4. Now again, if I click on the button, then what should happen? The count should increment to 5 or it should remain 4. Here in the add scoped, right, it will remain 4. Why? Okay. So first time you fill the form, the count increments to 4. Then we click the create button again, right? So the total staff count will be still 4. And this is because for a scoped service with every HTTP request, we get a new instance. For every HTTP request, we get a new instance, because here, when you are making a request from the form, it's the new GET request you are making. There is no redirection is happening within it. Okay, but within the same HTTP request, if the service is required in multiple places, like in the view or in the controller, then the same instance is provided for the entire scope of the HTTP request. So here, say both the home controller in the create action method and the create view will use the same instance of the service for a given HTTP request, right? That's why the create view is also able to see the new staff added by the create action method. So create view can see that, okay, now there are not 3 members, but 4 members, because create action method has already added 1 staff member. And hence, we see the total staff count as 4. But as you make a new request from the create form, right, you are not redirecting through the code. You are making a new request from a create form, which is a GET request, right? Then what will happen? You will get a new instance of the service. And here, we don't have a persistent data. Our older member has been lost. We are not fetching data from the database. Okay, we are fetching data from the list, and whichever member we stored earlier in the list is lost now. In the mock staff repository, we have a default list where we have 3 members, right? That's why now what will happen? Those 3 members plus 1 you are adding. So whenever you will add a new member, you will always see the count 4. Is this point clear? Okay, whenever you will add, you will see the count 3, because here you have some static data, hard coded data. So every time that data is 3, that count is 3, plus you add 1, 4. Because whenever the request is from the form, right, not through your code, it's a new request. So it's new scope. And that's why 3 plus 1, always the count will remain 4. So that is add scoped service. Okay. Let's move to the next one. Okay. Then here now we are using the add transient. So in transient, it is simple. Every time new instance, right? So as the new instance gets created every time, what will happen? That instance will have access of a 3 member, plus you will add 1. So every time 4, right? So 3 member, okay, here. Sorry, yes. So whenever you will click on the create button, right, always it will show 3, not 4 actually. Right, and the reason is very simple. Because every time when you will click on the create button, it will be a new instance, right? And the new instance will know the list, and the list has always 3 members, so the count will just remain 3, right? Because every time you have the new instance. Okay, so here initially we see the total staff count 3. You provide the details, you click on the create button, right? But then again in the create view, you will see the total staff count as 3, because say in the transient service, every time and whenever a service instance is requested, right, a new instance would be created. So as a new instance is provided, right, within the same scope of this given HTTP request, right, that's why the create view is not able to see the new staff added by the create action of the home controller. And that's why it will see that, okay, the staffs which are available in the list, it is within its scope, and that's why it is showing you the count 3. Okay, so that's why here within the transient it will remain always 3, because for adding a staff member, one instance is created by the create action method in the home controller. Another instance, right, is serving the request for the create view, and that's why it won't see that already one staff member has been added to the list. And that's why it's the new instance, right? And here we don't have database, so that it can have the proper scope of it. And that's why you will see always the count as 3. Okay, so that's about these 3 services. Okay, so with a scoped service, we get the same instance within the scope of a given HTTP request, but a new instance across different HTTP requests. Okay, with a transient service, a new instance is provided every time an instance is requested, whether it is in the scope of the same HTTP request or across different HTTP requests. And with a singleton service, there is only single instance, and that instance will serve all requests. Okay, so here I have a question, that if we use database, say if our application is database driven, then out of these 3, which mechanism we should use to register our service? Add scoped, add transient, or add singleton? Which one we should use? Okay, so many of you are suggesting add scoped. Okay, fine, but for database it would be ideal if you use add transient. So whether any number of users are making a request, it doesn't make any difference, right? And there are no constraint of, say, integrity violations or transaction violation, right? Because in the backend you have a persistent store, right? So you don't have a worry of losing your data. Okay, so in the terms of database, you should use add transient, right? Because with add scoped, the issue is that, for example, say multiple requests are coming, right? And say multiple users are requesting the create action method, right? So then which user's instance is given to which user's create action method and create view? How would you distinguish? Say multiple users are trying to create stuff, right? And it is possible that while multiple requests are handled by the server, right, then which instance is used by which user, how you will take care of it? That's not possible. So what will happen? Right, it is possible that you will use some other instance. A user may use a different instance, then it is used in the create action method, then in the create view. And that's why it is ideal, right? Because say when you have a database, if the create action method succeeds, right, then the user's entry or the staff's entry will be created into the table. So you are not going to lose the data. And from where the create view will fetch the data? From the table, right? So for database perspective, add transient is the ideal choice. Okay, so there are no constraint violation, integrity violation. Okay, so more on this it will be discussed as Chatai sir will progress within the EF core criteria. Okay, so we should better go with add transient. We should register our services with add transient. Okay. Then we have certain questions, so you can try it by yourself. Okay, so even the answer is provided in the note sections of the PPT or PDF, so you can read it by yourself. So let's not discuss that. So now we are starting with .NET Core identity. Okay, can you recognize this person? Yes, Rabindranath Tagore, a poet, a writer, a painter, right? A teacher, a philanthropist, many roles, right? And I believe he is the first say non-European person to get a Nobel Prize. I believe in 1920 or 1930, it's around, or probably before 1920. But I don't remember the exact year in which he received the Nobel Prize. And the book for which I think it is named Gitanjali. It was collection of poetries. Right? The book for which say Rabindranath Tagore received the Nobel Prize, right? Anyone knows the length of the book? Any random guess? What should be the size of the book? Right, the book's layout is very small. It is probably the size of our palm, right? And in that book, where each page is size of your palm or your hand, right, there are 102 or 105 pages. So if you copy all the verses or the poetries which are available in the book, then you wouldn't require more than 5 to 6 A4 size paper, right? And for that he received the Nobel Prize, right? If you, and most of the poetries are available online free, right? Anytime you can read it, right? And each poetry has a different flavor. It will motivate you, right? If you are interested in these kind of things, right? So even say from my past experience, I found that even many students found it more interesting, and some of them say purchase the hard copy of it, though it is not necessary, because right now it is available online, and even say different website explains the meaning of each poetry. But here, as you will read each poetry every time, right, and this has worked for many people, each time you will find a different meaning out of it. From the same poetry, you can find the different meaning by yourself, not by someone else. When you will read someone else's explanation, you will definitely find different explanations as person changes. But as you will read with a different mood in mind, even you yourself, even if you are not a literature, say say you are not say that much liking the literature or say stories on even if you will read it, right, each time you will find a different meaning, right, for yourself. Some of the words are difficult to read because it was written back in 1920, right? So say if you find time, right, sometimes you just read this Gitanjali, okay? And essentially these poetries were written, right, for kids of age less than 10. Because this Rabindranath Tagore was interested in teaching, say, toddlers, right? Yes, so here, as Sainish is saying, it has a deep meaning. But what I always believe is that this deep terminology in today's time is very ambiguous. It's vague. For example, like deep learning. You perform deep learning, it solves your problem. But you don't know what is happening. So deep meaning should not mean that, right, you need to be as a laureate. You need to be a scholar to know it, right? So just don't be scared of reading it because it has deep meaning. It is actually very simple. That's what I was trying to say. It was written for, say, children under age 10, right? So that's why it was written for those children who were coming from, say, very, say, poor background in terms of, say, education, from the tribal areas, rural areas, right? And that's not the situation right now. It was written in 1920. So actually we should be able to understand it properly, right? Okay, so now let's continue. So similarly, this identity that now we will talk about, okay, that will allow us to do the authentication, authorization. Yes, definitely, Sainish. And that's what I'm saying, that as you will understand each time, right, if you find something good from it, that's really better, right? That's the usefulness of it. Okay, so thank you. And it seems that you have read it, so thank you for that. Okay. So now what is ASP.NET identity? So identity is a membership system. Okay, that means it will allow you to maintain your users. It will allow you to maintain the roles for your users, etc. Right, and this is also available in .NET framework. Identity is also available in .NET framework, and if you want to use it in your project, you may use it. Okay, the configuration, the way of configuration is a little bit different than .NET Core, but already some good tutorials are available by Microsoft Docs and some other good websites, so you can use it. So this identity allows us to create, read, update, and delete user accounts. It supports account confirmation, say when you are deleting, when someone is resetting the password, right? When someone is, say, changing, say, some other information, etc. Then authentication, authorization, password recovery, two-factor authentication with SMS. So all these things are supported via identity membership system, right? It also supports external login providers like through Microsoft account, Facebook account, Google account. Also, you can give access to your system for the user, right? Now, how to add identity in .NET Core application? So whenever, say, you first create an EF core based application, then what you do when you create a database driven application, then you have one DB context class. Say your application DB context class. In my case, it is app DB context, or it could be staff model. It could be anything. The name could be anything. But here we must ensure that it must inherit from DB context. This app DB context need not suffix with DB context. Okay, it could be app model, staff model, anything. App DB, staff DB. You can give any name you want to, right? But it must inherit from DB context. when we are attaching entity framework core with our application. But when you use identity support, you need to change this behavior. Instead of inherit from DB context, you must inherit from identity DB context. Your DB context class, application specific DB context class, must inherit from identity DB context. Right now it is showing the red squiggly line because some packages are not installed for identity, right? But here the question comes in mind that if we use identity DB context, then what will happen for DB context? So the DB context, okay, so identity DB context is a super class of DB context. Okay, so what will happen internally, right? When you will inherit from identity DB context, you are also inheriting from DB context. Okay, so with DB context, what you intend to do? You create a database, and whichever your model are available, that should be created. It should create the tables for all those model in the database. Okay, and what should be the name of our database? AppDB context. Very likely, if in the constructor, if you don't change it, right, the name of the database is AppDB context, right? Within that, it will create all the tables based on your model. Okay, then now through this identity DB context, it will create some other tables like users, roles, user in roles, etc. Okay, so these tables would be created within this database. And when you inherit from identity DB context, right, in a way you are also inheriting from DB context. So you don't have to worry about it, right? So first of all, the first step to add identity is to inherit your application DB context class from identity DB context. You get a red squiggly line, you click on control dot, it will ask you to install some packages. Okay, once you install those packages, the red squiggly line will go away. Then as we register the, say, EF core services in the configure services method, okay, in similar fashion, we need to register the identity services. Okay, so how to register identity services and where to register? We need to register in the configure services method. Okay, we'll inject or we'll register with the dependency injection container in the configure services method, right? And where we will do it? We will do it before add controller with views, right? So you can see here that here I'm adding the service. So already I've added the AppDB context, right? And for AppDB context, I specified the option, okay, that the get the connection from the connection string named staff DB connection. So my connection string is available in some of my JSON file. Okay, either say it is in the launch setting.json file, if it is in the say, development mode, right? And then you add services.add identity. Services.add identity. So here you are adding the identity. The earlier configuration, this services.add DB context or add DB context pool. I think in the EF core, if it is covered, then it is only services.add DB context. Is this covered in the EF core part? So essentially this first line, services.appdb context or appdb context pool is for registering your EF core services. For that you need your connection services, right? And where your this database code is available, so it is available in appdb context. Okay, that's your generic parameter. And you are passing the option that, okay, where is the connection string you need to search for? So you need to search in the configurations file, and the name of the connection string is staff DB connection. Right, that is for EF core. Now what is for identity? Services.add identity, and then here you specify two generic parameter. Here in the identity you specify two generic parameter. Which are these parameter? Identity user and identity role. Okay, So identity user class is provided by .NET Core, and it contains properties like username, password hash, email, etc. Okay, so this is the class that is used by default by the .NET Core Identity Framework to manage registered user of your application. Because whenever you will do authentication, authorizations, what you will need, who is the user and what is the role of it. These two information you will need for authentication and authorization. So information about user is with the identity user class. Information about role is with identity role class. So that information you specify. Okay, and that's the default. If you want to change it, you may change it. Right? And we will see an example of it as well. Say we will change this identity user class because we want to modify or we want to have some extra property than the default one for our user. Then what changes we do, that we will see. But here, this add identity method adds the default identity system configuration for the specified user and the role. An identity user is a class for users property. Identity role is a class for roles property. Okay, and for this identity system, where all these informations are available, it is available in the FDB context, right? That's why we register with add entity framework store, and the generic class name is FDB context. Okay, so that's how we configure it. So that's the step number 2. Configure ASP.NET Core identity services. Okay, so the first step is that your FDB context should inherit from identity DB context. Then you should configure .NET Core identity services, specifying your identity user, identity role, and where all these services are registered in your system. So it is available in the FDB context. Next, then, so now you want to perform authentication, right? So you need to register it because authentication is nothing but a middleware. So we need to register with the HTTP request processing pipeline in the configure method of startup class. So where should we register it? Definitely before use routing, because routing will go to the controller, see the action method and start executing. But before that, we must check whether the user is authenticated or not, right? And that's why we should use authentication middleware before routing, but after static files. Why? Because you may want to render, say, login page to the user, registration page to the user, and there you may want to use images, videos, say client-side files like JavaScript, style sheets, etc. So if you will not use static files, those files won't be rendered, right? So use static files will come first, then will come the use authentication, right? And then comes the use routing. Okay, so here it must be clear that why the authentication middleware is coming before the routing and coming after the static files middleware. Okay, because all these client-side scripts, they are static files. Okay, they won't be rendered. Then user will see the screen, but it will have a poor output, or some of the functionality may not work if it is based on your client-side files. Okay, so use static files, then use authentication middleware. Yes. Okay, that means Vishruth, you want some routes without authentication. That means you want access to them anonymous. So we have a mechanism, because for example, for login, for registration, we won't need authentication, right? So we will see the case of it. Okay, possibly in today's lecture. Otherwise, next time. And today also I'll do the same thing. Okay, after the lecture, I'll upload this entire presentation. Okay, so if you have time, you can just go through it. Otherwise, we will continue in the next class. Okay. So now the fourth step. So still we are in the process. The third step is to add authentication middleware. And right now we are not caring about authorization. Okay, so we are keeping it simple. So authentication middleware is added. That was the third step. Fourth step, add identity migration. Is migration covered in EF Core? say if you are aware in the .NET Framework MVC, we need to add ADO.NET Entity Data Model for code first approach. For code first in .NET Framework, if you are aware, we need to add ADO.NET Entity Data Model class, which is the FDB context. Here we need to add such things externally. We have created FDB context class, right? So now we need to make a, say, the word is both instance should be same. So what is the word for that? Say you have your database at one side and other side you have your models. So whatever change you make into your models, those changes should be applied directly to your database and the table. Yes, your database and models should be in sync. If you make changes into your model, changes should apply to the tables of your database. If you make changes into your tables and database, those changes should be reflected into your model in your application. Your database and the model should be in sync. And this syncing is happening through the migration, right? So here, what I want to